Hey y'all, welcome to this week's episode of Unfit to Print. I'm your host Amber Athey. I'm the Washington editor for The Spectator and a senior Blankley Fellow with the Steamboat Institute. Before we get started, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, and or Apple Podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. If you'd like to become a premium subscriber, then head on over to amberathey.supercast.com. Before we get into this week's political topics, I just wanted to take a minute and give a little ode to this little thing called the Choco Taco. Now, I've never actually had one of these, but I was really sad to find out that these were being discontinued. And they were trending on Twitter for a while after this news broke. This is a Klondike product, and it's a dessert taco. They say on the packaging, quote, "It's genius." And I tend to agree. This is, to me, an amazing product of American innovation. You have an ice cream cone that has been folded into the shape of a taco. You have a chocolate swirled ice cream in the taco ice cream shell. And then you have the top of the taco actually dipped in a chocolate coating with peanuts on it. And I know if you're listening to this podcast, you can't see it, but I'm just going to hold it up again for the people who are watching this. Because, I mean, like, look at this. This is beautiful. People are talking recently. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week about these so-called fusion restaurants that have become very popular, where you're mixing two types of cuisine together, like maybe it's Mexican and Asian food combined into one, where you're making like poke burritos and things like that. This is the original fusion food, the Choco Taco. This is combining a delectable American ice cream cone with a taco. It's brilliant. So again, I've never had one. I assume it's delicious. In my family, we grew up with the drumsticks, and I was always a big fan of those Good Humor strawberry shortcake ice cream bars. But I just am mind blown that they are going to stop selling these. And so the reason I have this one is my boyfriend actually came home with 2 of these the other day after the news broke that the Choco Tacos were going to be discontinued. And he said that the libs could pry the Choco Tacos from his cold, dead hands. And I tend to agree. Again, never had one, but I don't know why they're trying to take these away from us. It's kind of like when Barack Obama suggested that he was going to pursue an assault weapons ban, and all of a sudden everybody went out and stocked up on guns and ammo. That's how I feel about these Choco Tacos. Never wanted one before now, never really been that interested in it. Just wasn't really on my radar, but now I'm all in on the Choco Taco, and I think that this delectable dessert deserves better. I have no idea why I just spent that much time talking about a frozen dessert that I have never eaten, but that is just evidence of the allure of the Choco Taco, I guess. So hopefully you guys are still with me, and if you are, we are now going to move on to slightly less glamorous topics and give you a little update on the monkeypox outbreak. The World Health Organization has now dubbed this a global health emergency, and a new study that was published by NBC News reveals how this virus is actually spread. And it turns out that it was pretty much exactly what we suspected. So the NBC News article is about a peer-reviewed paper that analyzed the spread of the monkeypox virus. And the opening sentence, the lead of this story, is the global monkeypox outbreak is primarily being driven by sex between men, according to the first major peer-reviewed paper to analyze a large set of cases of the virus. An epidemiologist at Brown University by the name of Jennifer Nuzzo says these data point clearly to the fact that infections are so far almost exclusively occurring among men who have sex with men. The clinical presentation of these infections suggests that sexual transmission, not just close physical contact, may be helping spread the virus among the population. And it goes on to say that anal sex in particular has been shown to contribute to the spread of monkeypox and also risky promiscuous sexual behaviors. There was a thread on Twitter earlier this week that caught the attention of a lot of people who have been following the spread of monkeypox, particularly in the US. And this thread is by someone who calls himself Babe the Pig Boy. And his profile picture is basically a half nude picture. And let me just warn you guys, this thread is very graphic. I'm going to read some of it. If you're not comfortable hearing about disgusting sexual depravity, then maybe just fast forward about a minute or so. But I think it's important to actually share what the people who are contracting monkeypox are saying about how they got it, because it really helps illuminate what our public health messaging should be on this. And that's not similar to COVID, like we need to shut down the country. The message is actually, you should probably not be going to orgies and having unprotected sex with strangers. So Babe the Pig Boy shares on Twitter that he has monkeypox. And he said he wanted to give an honest account of how he got it and how his symptoms manifested. So he says, I finally got back into the swing of things and attended a friend's birthday orgy Saturday the 9th. First of all, as my friend Chadwick Moore points out in an article for The Spectator, who the hell has a birthday orgy? And if you don't go to the birthday orgy, are you considered a bad friend? Do you have to bring a gift to the birthday orgy, or is your presence gift enough? Can you go to the birthday orgy but decline to participate in support of your friend? Does the birthday orgy have to actually take place on your birthday, or can it be like a birthday week kind of thing? How close to your birthday does the orgy have to take place in order for it to be considered a birthday orgy? Does every member of the orgy have to have sex with the birthday boy in order for him to call that a successful birthday orgy? I have many questions about this. I probably would rather not know the answers to any of those questions. But anyway, Babe the Pig Boy says he was at this friend's birthday orgy. He said, I had been watching the news on monkeypox, but the general feelings on it really were and still are developing by the day, so no one was especially worried. He goes on, it gets so gross, guys. I'm sorry that I have to read this. This part's the worst part. Really, truly, if you have a hard time with disgusting descriptions of depraved sexual acts, then please fast forward. So he says, I attend the orgy, have a great time. God, I can't even believe I have to read this. Guzzled a metric fuck ton of human piss. No, I did not read that incorrectly. That is what it says. I think I had sexual contact with around 15 men. Similar to the orgy on Saturday. Oh, so the birthday orgy was actually a follow-up orgy to another orgy that he had already attended. He said he had a great time, met some great people, then stumbled my piss-drunk ass home. So then he gets the monkeypox, and his takeaway from all of this is not that he shouldn't have gone to the orgies, not that he should have been drinking other people's urine, not that he should have been practicing safer sex. His takeaway from contracting monkeypox at his friend's birthday orgy is that it's reductive to tell gay people to not have sex. It didn't work in the early days of AIDS, and clearly it's not working now. I don't want to tell gay people not to have sex, or at least that's not, cut that part out, Sonic, because I do want to tell gay people not to have sex. Because it's sin, it's a sin. Okay. I don't think anyone is advocating for telling gay men that in response to monkeypox, they shouldn't be having sex. What they're saying is that gay men should reduce their risky sexual behaviors. They should avoid having unprotected sex, particularly with strangers. They should avoid participating in orgies where they drink human urine. And basically, they should be limiting their sexual activities to people they know do not have the virus and making sure that they are wearing protection if they are going to engage in sexual activity. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to tell people that if there is a sexually transmitted disease going around that is most likely spread through anal sex between gay men, then yeah, we should probably say you're not allowed to participate in the orgy right now. That's, again, very reasonable thing to say. But now the new narrative is that if you tell gay people that they should not be having birthday orgies during the monkeypox spread, then you are in fact a bigot. I wish I was kidding, but this is 100% true. Now remember, during COVID, we couldn't go to church. A lot of people couldn't go to work because they were deemed non-essential. People were not allowed to see their family members. They were not allowed to visit their grandparents. They were not allowed to attend funerals of loved ones. But we are not allowed to tell the precious LGBTQ plus community that they cannot have an orgy. What kind of warped nonsense is that? So I thought that everyone would just recognize, okay, there's a peer-reviewed study. The science says this is spreading in this manner. If you say that, that's just the facts. Them's the facts. But no, you are now going to be labeled a bigot, and not just by the woke left, but actually by libertarians and conservatives as well. On Fox Business, my friend Ned Ryan was on Kennedy's program, and he was talking about this peer-reviewed study that found that monkeypox spreads primarily among unprotected sex between gay men. And he offered the same policy prescription that any sane, logical person would offer, which is that they should be practicing safe sex or abstaining from sex. And Brad Palumbo and Kennedy, as well as Marie Harf, who's a Democratic strategist, all three denounced Ned Ryan as being bigoted for offering a potential solution to slow the spread of monkeypox. It's you have to watch this to believe it, that at least two of the people on this panel are supposedly right-leaning. And then, of course, you have the Democrat. I mean, she's liable to say stupid stuff all the time. That's neither here nor there. But you can't go on Fox Business anymore and say something completely rational without being called a bigot. I mean, what world are we living in? So here's the clip where Ned Ryan, I think, makes the case really well, is very respectful about it, and defends himself, and is just denounced by these other two morons. Here you go. Give it a watch.
As for monkeypox, I think there's a pretty good rule in life. Don't attend gay orgies. When you look at the New England Journal's report of the 528 cases that reviewed.
Ned, come on, man.
It's not about gay. How about not any orgies?
Go look at the New England Journal's report that NBC News reported on Friday, in which of the 528 cases they reviewed, 95% were sex between men. I think we actually have to have a serious conversation about where this is coming from. When I'm done, Brad, you can talk. Instead of going crazy and declaring a national pandemic when 3,000 people have it right now, it's insane.
I don't know, man. You don't have to be gay to get monkeypox, and you don't have to be bigoted when you talk about treating something that is that easily spread, Marie.
It's not bigoted.
Yeah, it is.
This is science, Kennedy. 95% of the cases from the New England Journal.
You know what? I'm going to let Brad respond. Okay, I'm going to let Brad respond because, Brad, we had 372 doses. The United States, in Denmark, where the smallpox, monkeypox vaccine is manufactured, they were ready to go, but because this has been an issue for more men in the gay community, it seems like it has been lower on the priority list. Brad.
Yeah, look, Ned is right when he says that monkeypox right now is mostly affecting gay men. The problem is that public health-wise, not going to orgies in general is a good policy to not get sexually transmitted diseases.
100%.
Here's the really insane part of this reaction to what Ned Ryan is saying. All facts, by the way. What's insane about this reaction is that Kennedy and Brad Palumbo in this clip are pretending that they are the compassionate ones. They are the ones who are actually concerned about gay men. And the real problem, they think, is that the monkeypox outbreak is going to be used to shame certain sexual proclivities in the gay community. They think that gay people need protecting not from the monkeypox, but from the stigma that comes with risky sexually promiscuous behavior. But if you actually care about the gay community, Don't you want to tell them how they can prevent themselves from getting this highly contagious and painful sexually transmittable disease? Aren't you helping them by giving them the tools and facts that they need in order to take control of their own health? Isn't that the best way to empower members of the gay community? Instead, Kennedy and Brad Colombo would rather them continue with risky behavior and put themselves at risk for catching monkeypox so as not to hurt their feelings. This harkens back to the early days of the COVID pandemic when we weren't allowed to call it the Wuhan flu or the China virus because that could be considered xenophobic, and placing the blame on China at all, even though every conventional theory at this point says that the lab leak is the most likely hypothesis for how this virus ended up spreading to the rest of the world. We were told that was racist. It was racist to place any blame on China. Now fast forward and you're not allowed to suggest simple scaling back of sexually promiscuous behavior in the gay community so that they don't catch the monkeypox. And it actually gets worse than just these morons on Fox Business chastising Ned Ryan for telling the truth. The New York City Health Department is actually suggesting and urging health officials to rename monkeypox to something else because monkeypox could be construed as offensive to minority communities. I wish I was kidding. The New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene sent a letter to the World Health Organization saying that they have growing concern for the potentially devastating and stigmatizing effects that the messaging around the monkeypox virus can have on these already vulnerable communities, referring to Black and brown people. Therefore, I write to urge you to act immediately on renaming the monkeypox virus as the WHO stated they would do during a June 14th press briefing over 5 weeks ago. It goes on to say that they are reminded by fierce advocates who served on the front lines as the HIV/AIDS epidemic emerged. Early misinformation about the virus led people to believe that it was spread to humans after people in Africa engaged in sexual activity with monkeys. This kind of false messaging created incalculable harm and stigma for decades to come. Continuing to use monkeypox may bring up these traumatic feelings of racism and stigma, particularly for Black people and other people of color. So these are the concerns of the New York public health officials who still really haven't fully admitted to the fact that they killed thousands of elderly people by forcing them back into nursing homes when they had the COVID-19 virus. So these are the priorities of people who pretend to actually care about the very communities that they harm with their policies. It's completely hypocritical and just a classic example of Democratic cities and commissioners and health officials completely getting all of their policies backwards and ending up harming people in the process. Vice President Kamala Harris is truly the gift that keeps on giving. Every time she gives a public appearance, she says something completely idiotic. And the latest example was when she was addressing Americans with disabilities, and she decided to begin her speech by offering up her pronouns and then describing her physical appearance for the blind people who were in the room. Go ahead and listen to this.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome these leaders for coming in to have this very important discussion about some of the most pressing issues of our time. I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit. And
now, as you all can imagine, I am probably going to refrain from making fun of Kamala's suit color. That's already gotten me in trouble before. Although I wonder if you're allowed to make fun of a blue suit. You're just not allowed to make fun of a brown suit because only making fun of the brown suit is racist. Like, for example, if I said that Kamala Harris looks like a blueberry, would that be considered racist and could I get fired for that? Or is it only saying that she looked like a UPS employee? I'm really not sure how the rules of this game work, so I think I'm just going to stay out of it completely. But here's the thing. I know a lot of people have been defending Kamala Harris saying, well, besides the pronouns thing, which is objectively ridiculous, she was just describing for blind people in the room what she looked like since they can't see her. And I certainly understand that, and I know that that is a common thing that disability advocates say people should do for the visually impaired. However, if Kamala is only doing this when she is 100% sure that there are in fact blind people in the room, then she's just pandering. Because if she did really think that this was the appropriate way to be inclusive to people who are blind, then she would be introducing herself this way every time she had a public appearance. And it's a little condescending that she would only do it when she has this specific event with Americans with disabilities. Matt Walsh made a really good point as well, because Kamala Harris in this clip is wearing a mask. And while she is trying to supposedly be inclusive to Americans who are blind or visually impaired, she is being exclusive to people who are deaf by covering her mouth. She is making it more difficult for hearing impaired individuals to be able to understand what she's saying. Yes, there are things like closed captioning and American Sign Language, but a lot of deaf people do find that reading lips can be a very effective visual aid when understanding someone who's speaking. And so by putting this mask over her face, she has made it more difficult for those individuals to be able to understand the vice president. So this is a case of pandering gone wrong. This is wokeness for show and not in reality. Kamala Harris is doing this because she wants to send a signal to the right people. It's not because she actually cares about the ability of Americans with disabilities to be able to see and hear her. This type of performative wokeness is so typical of the progressive left, though. They all just try to out-woke each other by virtue signaling over and over again. It's like the big corporations who put pride flags in their bios during the month of June. But then as soon as it turns July, they all get rid of the rainbow flags. And of course, their Saudi Arabia counterparts or counterparts in the Middle East don't have any such imaging. Or like when you have AOC and Ilhan Omar getting arrested outside of the Supreme Court during a planned demonstration, and they pretend to be handcuffed, but then pull their hands out from behind their back to give a fist pump to the activists surrounding them. This is all a game for them. It's all about the appearance and perception of being inclusive or woke, and it never actually has any substance. Turning Point USA just finished hosting their annual Student Activism Summit down in Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis was there, Donald Trump was there to give a speech, and it looked like the event was a lot of fun. I was just at the Young Women's Leadership Summit in Dallas a couple of months ago, and I think Turning Point does a really good job of destigmatizing conservatism for young people. They somehow caught the ire of the ladies of The View, though, and The View has just recently announced that former Trump official Alyssa Farah will be joining as the so-called conservative commentator at the desk. Alyssa Farah is someone who somehow has managed to paint herself as someone who is super apologetic about working for the Trump administration and is just horrified by January 6th and the president's behavior and just shit talks Republicans all the time now on her Twitter account and on The View. But we're supposed to believe that she's the really principled conservative, even though she has seemingly flip-flopped on pretty much all of her views in the course of just a couple of months. But anyway, the ladies of The View decided to talk about this Turning Point conference, and they specifically dialed in on this neo-Nazi protest that took place outside of the event. Now, obviously, Turning Point had nothing to do with these people being there. They did not sanction this protest. It took place on public property, and Turning Point actually condemned this neo-Nazi demonstration the day that it happened. And my friend Andrew Colvett, who works with the organization, released a statement indicating that they basically tried to ignore it so as not to give it any more media attention or any attention from the attendees. And they thought that that was the right strategy. Basically, just not give these people any airtime. But sure enough, The View decided that these neo-Nazis were not just representative of Turning Point USA, but that they were actually a part of the conference itself. The ladies of The View claimed that the neo-Nazis were out there in front of the conference with anti-Semitic slurs, and one of them actually said that Governor Ron DeSantis did nothing to condemn the neo-Nazis or get them out of the event, even though he had actually spoken the day prior to this demonstration taking place outside. So go ahead and watch this first View clip where they're talking about this as if this is somehow representative of Turning Point, or as if Turning Point had anything to do with this neo-Nazi demonstration.
Out there, neo-Nazis were in the front of out there in front of the conference with anti-Semitic slurs and, the Nazi swastika.
You let them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit. quick clarification about the neo-Nazis at the Turning Point event. They were outside protesters. My point was more metaphorical, that you embraced them at your thing. I know they were not in the building, but they were in the mix.
So this is obviously just straight up slander, defamation, whatever you want to call it. This is completely 100% false. These women are smearing this organization. So Turning Point USA actually decided to fight back, and they sent a legal cease and desist to The View, explaining that they had condemned the neo-Nazis, that they were on public property, and they had, again, nothing to do with this student activism summit. And on the program, The View had to read this legal disclaimer indicating that Turning Point had condemned them and that they had nothing to do with the organization. But Whoopi Goldberg persisted. She went on to say that Turning Point had let them in and that they knew what they were. She said, but you let them in and you knew what they were. So The View actually had to go on and read another legal disclaimer explaining that the neo-Nazis were outside protesters and Turning Point didn't let them in. And Whoopi's response was, my point was metaphorical, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. Watch this and just shake your head at poor little Whoopi. She's dumber than a box of rocks.
Okay, so you have to read this thing.
Oh, I've got a legal note. The conservative group.
Sonny normally does this, but
I know.
Yes.
This is our knockoff lawyer.
Okay.
The conservative group, Turning Point USA, has condemned the group of neo-Nazis and said they have nothing to do with the organization.
Yeah, but where was DeSantis is what I want to know.
But you let them in.
President, open your
You
back
let
door.
them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit. We'll be right back.
So the next day on The View, Turning Point sends another cease and desist letter. And at this point, Sarah Haynes is forced to read another legal disclaimer. And instead of offering an actual apology for this blatant mischaracterization and lie that Turning Point had anything to do with neo-Nazis, they basically say that this is a clarification because they weren't clear in their previous remarks. It's not that you weren't clear, it's that you completely lied about and smeared an organization by linking them to neo-Nazi protesters. It's disgusting and unconscionable, it's unethical, and it deserves far greater weight in terms of an apology than just, oh yeah, sorry, we weren't totally clear. So go ahead and watch Sarah Haynes read off this legal disclaimer. You can see that they're not taking this seriously at all. And then at the end, listen to what Alyssa Farah chimes in.
Everybody, and I have to stop talking because you have that note.
I do have a note. So on Monday, we talked about the fact that there were openly neo-Nazi demonstrators outside the Florida Student Action Summit of the Turning Point USA group. We want to make clear that these demonstrators were gathered outside the event and that they were not invited or endorsed by Turning Point USA. A Turning Point USA spokesman said the group, quote, 100% condemns those ideologies, and said Turning Point USA security tried to remove the neo-Nazis from the area but could not because they were on public property. Also, Turning Point USA wanted us to clarify that this was a Turning Point USA summit and not a Republican Party event. So we apologize for anything we said that may have been unclear on these points.
They still invited Matt Gaetz, though, I would just like to know.
So first of all, I think it's interesting that they chose to have Sarah Haynes read this legal disclaimer. It really should have been Whoopi who had to read this because she was the one who kept making the defamatory statements even after they had already issued several legal disclaimers on the show yesterday. Having Sarah Haynes read it is simply not good enough, and I think Whoopi Goldberg herself should have to offer a public apology to Turning Point USA. But then at the end, after Sarah Haynes reads this disclaimer, you hear Alyssa Farah say, but they still invited Matt Gaetz. I don't know what that has to do with neo-Nazis at all. It sounds like she's trying to defend Whoopi and the other women of The View for their mischaracterization of Turning Point because they're affiliated with a Republican member of Congress. Matt Gaetz has not been accused of being a neo-Nazi as far as I know, and if he has, I'm sure it's a ridiculous smear from the left. He's not a neo-Nazi. He still hasn't been charged with this alleged child sex exploitation, presumably because the Justice Department doesn't actually have anything on him, and this was another fabricated smear. But Alyssa Farah throws this out as if this is vindication for The View. Well, they had Matt Gaetz there, so it's not, beyond the pale to think that they would have neo-Nazis too, because they're just completely the same thing. How idiotic. I think actually, in addition to Whoopi having to apologize, Alyssa Farah should have to apologize for throwing out that little dumbass comment as well. But after this whole incident happened, Sue the View started trending on Twitter because people were urging Turning Point USA to take further legal action. These disclaimers were not enough, and they need to sue the hell out of The View to teach them a lesson about constantly spreading lies about conservative and Republican organizations on the program. I am 100% in favor of this. I think they should Nicholas Sandman these people. The media gets away with so many lies about the right, and they're never held accountable for it. And the only way they're going to be held accountable is if we use libel laws in our favor and actually start suing these people and making this very financially painful for them to keep propagating these smears. It's the only way that the media is going to change its behavior. And one of my biggest pet peeves with conservatives and the way they interact with mainstream corporate media is that so many of them are desperate for relevance, and they're desperate to be loved by the people who will always hate them and smear them. So even when the media says horrible things about them, this was a constant in the Trump administration, they still come crawling back and beg to be on their TV shows. They let their media reporters interview them. They give them quotes. They give them scoops. It's outrageous. How are you going to possibly defeat the corporate media? How are you going to get them to stop lying about you if you don't ever punish them for treating you badly? That is exactly how you should deal with an evil, lying press. You cut off their access, you refuse to give them anything, and you treat them like dirt, because that's what they deserve. If they're going to go out there and claim that Turning Point USA is affiliated with neo-Nazis and let them into their event, then absolutely sue them for millions of dollars, put their names in a lawsuit, and force them to defend themselves, because this type of behavior has gone on long enough. They're never going to learn until you make it hurt. Chirs Cuomo, the disgraced CNN anchor, has found work again after news reports that he was reportedly trying to become a volunteer firefighter in New York. He now has been signed on to startup news network News Nation. Full disclaimer, I have been on News Nation before. I was on Leland Vittert's show. Enjoyed it. It was a good time. They also have quite a few Democratic left-leaning hosts as well, like Ashley Banfield and Dan Abrams. And Dan Abrams recently interviewed Chirs Cuomo about his departure from CNN. And in this interview, Chirs Cuomo basically denies responsibility for any of the unethical things that he did while he was at CNN. He even seems to suggest, and this is furthered in his lawsuit against his former employer, that CNN knew what he was doing in terms of trying to look into his brother's accusers. Now, if you guys don't remember, Chirs Cuomo was accused by Attorney General Letitia James, according to transcripts and text messages and phone records, of actually digging into the history of Andrew Cuomo's sexual harassment accusers, presumably to help his brother defend himself against the accusations. He was actually using private source information that had been obtained by CNN journalists and was using that to help Andrew Cuomo smear his accusers. So not only did he use this confidential information and fail to protect sources, but he also was intervening as a journalist into a situation involving a family member. So everything about it was unethical. Now, I always say the sexual harassment accusations against Andrew Cuomo were actually a distraction from the bigger issue, which was his handling of the COVID pandemic and his decision to put elderly people who had contracted COVID back into nursing homes, thereby propagating the spread of COVID and leading to the deaths of thousands of elderly people from the virus. And Chirs Cuomo was complicit in that because he had Andrew Cuomo on his program multiple times a week, laughing and joking about nasal swabs and who their mother loves more, and completely ignoring the real policies behind the pandemic. And it's hard to believe that Chirs Cuomo did not know what his brother was doing and just how horrible this nursing home policy was going to end up being. So Chirs Cuomo should have been fired probably for all of these softball interviews he gave his brother at the height of the pandemic, but he was ultimately fired for intervening in the sexual harassment accusations, and Andrew Cuomo ended up resigning because of those accusations and not because of his mishandling of the COVID pandemic. So everything about this story was sort of a weird cover-up for the deaths of those elderly people, but either way, the Cuomos, at least for the time being, were out of power. But the Cuomos are like cockroaches. You can't just get rid of them. They don't die. They keep on coming back. And in this case, now Chirs Cuomo has a primetime show on News Nation, And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the attempted rehabilitation of his brother Andrew sometime soon. He will probably try to run for office again at some point. He may even try to go into the media, but I can promise you this is not the last that we have seen of Andrew Cuomo. And if Chirs Cuomo's quick rehabilitation is any indication, it's going to probably be happening sooner than we think. I would just advise News Nation to be very careful with their new hire because he has already shown that he has serious ethical lapses in judgment, serious ethical issues. He cannot separate his work from his family. And when your family members are powerful politicians, that is a serious problem for a journalist. So hopefully News Nation is able to keep Chirs Cuomo on the right track, because if he pulls another stunt like he did with his brother at CNN, then he risks undermining the credibility of the entire network, which is really bad news for a startup news company that is still building its reputation. Finally, this week, I saw this really disturbing video of Joe Biden, and I had to share it with you guys. This man manages to deliver several sentences without blinking a single time. It's actually almost impressive that he's able to keep his eyes open for that long. Now, for my dear listeners on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I apologize, you won't get the full context of this clip, but YouTube and Rumble users, you have to watch this absurd facial expression from the president.
You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cop. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American. Donald Trump lacked the courage to act. The brave women and men in blue all across this nation should never forget that.
This is like a full-on Weekend at Bernie's moment. I swear that they have just glued googly eyes on the president and are somehow pantomiming his mouth to move to make it look like he's speaking. It really does look like his eyes have almost been photoshopped onto this video. I don't know if this is a side effect of all the COVID drugs they were pumping into his system to make sure he didn't croak, but wow, what a disturbing video of the president. I have never seen a public official speak like this in my entire life. It is just the latest in a long line of bizarre public behaviors by this president. And the only thing that would surprise me less is if he had come out wearing a mask. Between crazy-eyed Biden and blue suit, she, her, Kamala, this is truly just a banner administration. That's it for this week's episode of Unfit to Print. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star review. If you'd like to become a premium subscriber, go on over to amberathey.supercast.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys next week.